Welcome to the Cinema Club podcast. I'm your host, Nick Leach, and I am very excited to share this week's episode with you. So glad that you are listening. The Cinema Club is like a book club, but for movies. Every month, I invite one member of the Cinema Club to be my co-host for that week, who will choose the movie of the month and join me on the podcast to talk about the film. The film we are talking about today is a film that is a bit different from what I am used to. I'm not the biggest horror fan, as you will hear, but this week we are talking about the movie I See You. And just to be completely clear, before we get any further, I want to give a big spoiler warning because we are going to be talking about anything and everything about the film, so enjoy.
Justin Witter, 10 years old. Went missing on a bike ride last night near Jupiter Park. Park ranger found the bike. No boy. I'll let you manage the situation as you see fit. You lead on this.
Now, if you remember, 9-year-old Michael King went missing just... Authorities are now telling parents of young children to keep them close at all times.
There's something up here!
You're gonna find him.
Mom?
Connor?
I'm sorry.
911 got a call from someone claiming to have seen our kidnapper.
You don't get to act like nothing happened.
Sorry. I don't know what's happening.
You have any idea what's coming for you?
I'm sorry.
And joining me on this episode as my co-host who chose the movie of this episode is Haley Sanders. So thanks so much, Haley, for choosing this movie. It's great to have you on board. Haley and I met at ECU in college. She was an acting student at the time. And unfortunately, we didn't get to actually work together during that time. But let us know who you are, Haley, and what brought you to the podcast and this movie. What made you choose the movie?
Hi, yes, I'm Haley, and yeah, we've known each other for a while. I'm still acting. I'm currently in the process of moving to Atlanta for acting, for film. So yeah, I was really excited to do this, and I was thinking about what would I choose? And I was trying to figure out another movie. I was like, no, I don't want to do this, because I saw this movie years ago, and I was like, what is that movie that's in the back of my head? I can't think about it. But then I was like, what? I should just do that one, the one that keeps popping into my head, because I loved the storyline, I remember, but I don't remember what it was about until I watched it again yesterday. So I love psychological thrillers. That's my genre. So I knew I would choose something like that. But I'm so glad I remembered what this one was called so I could interact with the storyline again, because it's so great. Absolutely. And joining us as our special guest is a good friend of mine, Juliana Lane. She and I went to school together at ECU for film and video. And the reason I really thought that she'd be the perfect guest is that we actually shot a short film together for her senior thesis project that she wrote and directed called Paranoid Insomniac. That was a little bit of a psychological thriller / horror, kind of dipped our toes into that genre a little bit. And it was so much fun. And I thought she was the perfect person to bring on the podcast. So welcome, Juliana. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello. I am so excited to be here. I thought, this was an awesome idea. Of course, like Nick said, we did some work together in college on a few projects, and we worked great together, and a lot of these shots actually reminded me of some of the shots from Paranoid Insomniac. It's
well, thank you. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was the cinematographer for that project.
Oh yeah, and you did great. It came out beautiful. But yeah, it was so much fun. The movie, the twists, the turns, the plot twist, you think and then you don't. And it was just a great movie to pick. Great selection. And I actually had never seen it. So this it was great. And I was tuned in the whole time. I was glued to the screen. So I'm a film major now, news. So it's a little different, a lot less artistic communication through it. It's more information based, but I'm learning a lot. And, having a film background definitely helps. And I love horror movies, so I'm glad to be here.
And the movie in question, you've already heard the trailer, everything. It is I See You. It's a 2019 film by Adam Randall. It's Adam's second film, and it's a 79% on Rotten Tomatoes. And let me just give a preface to this by saying that I am not a horror fan at all. I do not like being scared. Jump scares are literally the bane of my existence. I hate them. Also, like, if there are jump scares and stuff, I feel like they're very overused. But there were a lot of things in this movie that really surprised me, because this film, though it does have an R rating and is technically categorized as a horror film, it really is more of a psychological thriller. And when we were actually watching the film, I was just sitting there being like, this isn't a horror. This is like a lot more like Gone Girl and stuff like that. Very much a psychological thriller. There wasn't a lot of scares. There was a little bit of creepiness and stuff in there, but there wasn't a lot of scares. And that, I mean, I really appreciated that, but it was actually a really fun movie and very much surprised me. So with that, let's actually just dive in right into this film. 10-year-old Justin Witter is abducted while riding his bicycle through a park. 1 month after another boy, Michael King, went missing, Greg Harper is made lead detective on the case, assisted by Detective Spitsky. A green pocket knife is found at the scene, connecting the crime to a series of previous abductions committed by a man named Cole Griffin 15 years prior. Meanwhile, Greg's family life is in ruins after his wife Jackie had an affair. Their only child, Connor, remains deeply resentful towards her since he learned of the affair. So just right off the bat, the thing that really stood out to me, as Juliana has said already, is the cinematography here. He uses a lot of panning shots and pushing in shots and a lot of drone shots just to create this really eerie vibe. And it really sets the scenes for all of the scenes in the movie. And I think that's a really cool stylized choice. And also, they're playing with genre here a lot. Like, right off the bat, when we see the opening sequence of this boy that's riding his bicycle and then suddenly he gets just jerked off the bicycle, like, it puts you in a very, it just puts a question in your brain of what actually is going on here. Is this like a supernatural thing? Are they like playing with like ideas and being like metaphors and stuff here? It's a really interesting way to start the movie, I thought.
I definitely agree. And at first, when I saw it, and I will note this, like you said before, when into the movie, it said thriller, and then it said unsettling. And I laughed so hard. I've never seen that in a description. So I was like, great, like, I'm about to go to bed. This is perfect. And that scene that you're talking about with the bike, I thought the same thing. It looked paranormal because, and later when you find out, what happened, it doesn't really make sense because the bike hit and he flew backwards.
So far.
Yeah. So I'm like, how? And like in my head, I was like, wait a minute. Like, they definitely set it up. Like you said, the shots, the music too, like the creepy, like almost American Horror Story-esque, like messed up trumpet, like music they kept playing. They said a lot without saying any dialogue. Like, they said a lot with, the lighting, the shots, the music. They set it up. You knew it was about to be weird, but I love that you didn't know how it was going to be weird. And it just, you thought you had it at the beginning. And they definitely took you for a ride.
I was definitely thinking about the score. That was the first thing that came into my mind when I started watching it again, was how the music kind of at first contradicted to what was going on. And then it kind of makes it adds to that unsettling that you were talking about, because it's like, it kind of makes you feel like something's wrong. Like you said, like you don't know what. But then now when you find out what's really going on, it makes sense because it's like unsettling. You're like, something's not truthful here. Something's not matching up. But I also really like those difference in shots and the changing of shots with the bicycle scene was very like artistic in a way that made you kind of feel like an out of body experience. Like you were watching this happening from above or from, like from a different perspective, that you weren't with the kid, but you were like very close following him. So I thought that was really cool. Even the beginning that kind of like starting widening out and coming into what was happening just kind of adds to the whole storyline of finding out what's really going on in this little household in probably America, and how people are not who they might say they are.
I think what this movie does best is throw you twists and turns that you're not expecting. I think overall, structurally, it's nothing we haven't seen before, just to be a little critical. I mean, we've seen this trope of an affair having happened and having a broken family because of an affair. Some of the dialogue is kind of basic, if I may say. And I think the first half hour is a bit slow, but they're doing that for a reason. And it's the second half of the movie that is really where things get going and things actually make sense. Things line up and it actually pulls into its stride, really it gets itself on its feet. And as much as I have a problem with the first half being so slow, I think there's a reason for that, and it's just to build up the suspense so that the second half actually has a good pace.
Instead of wasting time with the little jump scares here and there, I feel like what you said, it has a reason. The first half you're kind of wondering what's going on, and once they take you, once the roller coaster starts, it's like boom, 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 and it's like you're not expecting anything they're doing. And so the first half is slow, but like you said, I think they played it off very well with that, because once they did start, stuff starts going wrong, it's a twist, it's a turn, it's more than a jump scare, it's worth more than that. And I feel like maybe I did notice that, but they leave you hanging through that first part that's so slow, and you're wondering, and then when it hits you, you weren't expecting that at all. So I think they did that well.
Yeah, I think it really appeals to our the things that happen in everyday life, especially with the things like this certain thing is missing. Where's my water bottle? Where's my phone? Where'd it go? It's not where I left it. And so they do that kind of throughout. And, with certain things missing, certain things are in the wrong place. And you're kind of like, oh, I've seen that before. I've noticed, a picture is crooked. Why? And so I think that's what really gets to me about psychological thrillers, is it gets in your head about what you experience in life and what you kind of worry about. And you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. And what's unsettling in real life. And so they do that very periodically throughout the first half. Kind of okay, yes, it could be explained, but maybe it's not explained the way that you think it is.
And as you're saying, that just brings us into the next part. So let's keep going. Greg and Spitsky are called in by the chief. She informs them that Cole is pushing for a mistrial in light of the new abductions. They go to speak with Braun, one of Cole's two surviving victims, but he becomes hysterical when he sees the two. Mysterious events start to occur in the Harper house. Silverware goes missing. Televisions turn on by themselves. Pictures are removed from their frames, and a repairman tells Jackie he was let in by her daughter. So just as you're saying, Haley, there's a lot of really weird things happening around this house. And that's the next thing I really noticed that really stood out to me and really made me to start to think, is this maybe playing into the supernatural vein of things? That's kind of where I thought this potentially was going, actually, because it's things are just turning on by themselves, all this kind of stuff. And it really starts to make you wonder what's happening. And again, he's playing with genre. At first, we're going with the supernatural. That's where we think it's headed, but it's not.
Yeah, I have a funny anecdote that relates to that, because I was home alone for a while one day and our TV turned on randomly downstairs. And I was like, oh, my God. And I listened to a lot of true crime and a lot of psychological thrillers and things. And I was like, oh, my God, someone's in the house. And I freaked out about it for 10, 15 minutes. And then I looked downstairs. I was trying to figure out what's going on. And I see my cat. He's 20-pound cat. He's a big cat. He's laying on our ottoman. And I was like, nah. And I went downstairs and he was laying on the remote. And so he had laid on it and turned on the TV. But I had sat there for like 15 minutes freaking out and be like, oh my God, someone's in the house. Something's going on. And so that's how I could relate to that. I was like, oh my God, the TV's turning on. What's happening? Who's here?
I definitely obviously can agree with that. Paranoid Insomniac was basically loosely based on a true story. Especially, our generation, I feel like a lot of us do listen to true crime and stuff like that. So, little bumps in the night, are a little more freaky than, than they should be probably. But the whole time they were really focusing on the mom, like the shots of the mom. Obviously she had just had an affair. And you're thinking that like she's going crazy too. So there was kind of that aspect, like, maybe, and some of my thoughts were like, okay, if there is something paranormal, it's obviously got the mom like all messed up. And like, I'm thinking the affair was because there's something with this demon or ghost or whatever's going on. And they kept showing her just very eerie scenes of her, looking in the distance or like seeing or hearing things that were actually happening, but we don't know if she's crazy or not. And that was a big thing too. And I thought, so that's where it was heading, that this mom is crazy. And, when, you find out later, it's like, wow, and, they definitely did that well too. Showing the mom and definitely with the pills, I thought the pills were going to play a bigger part. She's taking medicine, the husband's taking medicine. And I'm like, is this why Nick contacted me? Like, it's literally like the same thing. But
that's the plot of Paranoid Insomniac.
Yeah.
Paranoid Insomniac is about a girl who is losing it because she's trying to medicate herself and starts to see things, starts to see a demon at the end of her bed, starts to have these vivid nightmares that turn into reality. And it's actually, I was very impressed by when Juliana first gave me the script to Paranoid Insomniac, I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this. I'm not sure. But it was kind of just like a learning process along the way that I actually still do go back and watch it every now and then because it still does hold up, Juliana. Like, I'm surprised how much I go and watch it.
Yeah, no, it was definitely, and even on set, I feel like there was a lot of times where we were like, how do we do this? And then we would completely throw part of the script away and be like, we can't do this. Like, there's no way to do this with the budget we have and what we're doing. So I think there was one where we actually improvised a scene because we had to replace something. And, I can't imagine, I'm sure that they had this very well planned out, bigger budget, obviously. But it was fun. It was definitely a learning experience along the way of how do I portray my ideas, on paper and on the screen with what I have to work with. And it was a process.
And I think that's a little bit, again, being a little bit critical of the film. I think that's where this movie does itself a little bit of disservice because they are trying to fit in a lot of different ideas. And this is one of the ideas that kind of falls by the wayside of she's medicating and it doesn't really go anywhere, which I think is fine because it's a little detail that they do spend a little bit of time at the beginning of, but as soon as the second act hits, like you just forget about that part.
Yeah, I was going to say, as Juliana was talking, it made me think about that. So the concept of like isolation in this movie, because like the scenes with the mom or with most characters, but with the mom specifically, she's always alone. Like when she's, if she's not with her son or her husband for a brief second, she's always alone. Like even in her office at work, it's just a voice that says somebody's here to see your next minute. You never see her with other people and she's always just kind of in her own mind, or like the scenes where she's, suddenly awoken by something, she's by herself. And it does kind of come into question her sanity and what she's experiencing. Is it through her own perspective? Is it really happening? So I think it kind of plays into the whole concept of isolation because this movie is very like, most scenes are either just of the house and one person or two people or in the woods with, those are really the only scenes that have multiple people in them.
I think the thing that surprised me the most about this movie is the fact that it was made in 2019 before the pandemic. This is not a pandemic movie, but it absolutely could have been and could have easily been a pandemic movie and been a really good pandemic movie. Going forward, Jackie is visited by her former lover, Todd. Intent on continuing the affair later, she hides him in the basement while she's taking Connor to school. While in the basement, Todd is attacked by an unknown assailant. Jackie returns home to find him dead. She panics, assuming Connor has killed him. She and Greg bury his body. So this is Act 2. This is when things just are flipped on their head. This murder comes out of nowhere. I don't know what Jackie was thinking, just having Tom just be downstairs and just trying to hide him or whatever. Just tell him to go away or whatever. But when that bat comes out, I mean, we got Negan vibes all over here, coming in behind with the bat. This is when the pace goes from plodding along to, okay, now we're going somewhere.
And off of that, too, this is kind of where, when we already had a sense, it was actually one of the reviews that I read. I read a review that they hated the movie, obviously. They were just dogging it. And then one was actually...
Roger Ebert just hates this movie with everything that's in their body over there, Roger Ebert.
Yeah, like, what did the movie do to you? Damn, I thought it was good. Like, and I... But... he, it was, I couldn't read it. I was like, no, I want to hear like people's in-depth, what they have to say. And there was one point that I had the idea, but I didn't know the word to describe it. And they described it as suburbia, like kind of like, these people have a big house, they're wealthy, obviously, but the family's broken and, she had an affair and, everything, it's not what it seems. You would think suburbia, living the way that they do would be ideal. But as the movie progresses, you kind of see like, wow, these people have issues going on. Like, this is wild. And, I also played into when he got hit in the head with the pot from the roof. I was like, it was Connor, they already showed him angry. They built that up, that he had anger built up, the scene at the dinner table when he lost it, that really set up for that. And it, drags you in to believe that is what happened.
Yeah. When I keep thinking about it, it's going back to something I thought of while you were talking, like things keep happening to them, but it's like you're in their world and things keep coming in and out of it. Like there's a lot of aspects of the movie that aren't touched again, like we were talking about the pills, and then the kind of the affair, like Todd comes in. Where does he come from? Why did we don't even see him drive up, he just appears there. And so it's kind of like things are happening to them, but you don't get to see the world around them and where those things come from. You just experience it almost with them, but you don't get to see the main things that are happening, where they come from.
Back at home, Connor hears a clanging noise coming from the utility room. He discovers the missing silverware wrapped in clothing in the washing machine. He then receives a bizarre message on his computer as a person wearing a frog mask appears behind him. Greg and Jackie return home to find Connor tied up in the bathtub with a green pocket knife next to him. Jackie takes Connor to the hospital while Greg searches the house. So this is where we are finally in it. I think the thing that I love the most about this movie, honestly, is that frog mask. It's so creepy. And you see these people in that frog mask. You see Alec coming behind, having that frog mask on, about to do something bad, but he really isn't doing anything too bad. Like, they set him up with this creepy mask to be the worst person in the movie, and it's really not at all what is happening. And again, it's playing on that, hey, you think I'm gonna zig when I'm really gonna zag here. I'm gonna throw something at you that you think is gonna be the creepiest, scariest thing a part of this movie, and it's not at all. And I thought that was something that was really cool. What makes this movie different?
The scene where the mom is, in Connor's room when he had been missing. And a question I have about that too is like, when it was happening, I was like, man, like he's been missing for a little bit, like, and all the kids are going missing. Why haven't you guys called? And as soon as I almost wrote that in my notes, he like pops up. But when she's in the room and she's looking around and she sees the frog mask. Now I think if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was the first time we were introduced to that. Like really, we had no idea what that was. I thought maybe it was like a toy, and I'm like, damn, that's really creepy toy. Like, what is that? And when you find out later, it's very creepy. Like oh my gosh, like I saw that and I'm like, what is that? And you're right there, like with what Haley said, like you're right there with the characters feeling, what is that? Because that's the first time that we see that too. So they did that well.
Yeah. And the scene where, you know, the dad gets like locked in that closet when he's chasing the hamster. And then, you know, she comes out and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, what are you doing? And so like, and then afterwards she's looking around, kind of be like, what's going on? And then she like, when she's looking around in the room, I think he pops up is what you were talking about. And then that interaction kind of ends and she still keeps looking around, which I thought, I don't know why that just stands out to me, that it's kind of more human than I would expect in a movie. Like usually they look, something else happens and they're going on with their life. But she kind of looked and was like, this is weird. Something happened, lost her train of thought and then went back to it. And then we see the mask, the creepy thing.
I like in that, just a side note, I mean, because I'm a huge animal person, I do like that they made sure that we knew that hamster was okay, because I was worried in the next scene. I'm like, thank you for that. That is, you get major points, because I was like, wait, what about the hamster? He just gets out of the closet and keeps going. And I'm like, did you leave it in there? Like, and then the next scene is it on the wheel. And I'm like, okay, cool. They did that. I appreciate that very much.
No hamsters, no animals were harmed in this movie. Maybe some humans were, but no animals. So this is where things change. The film then jumps back in time and reveals that the mysterious happenings in the house were caused by two homeless people, Mindy and Alec, who have been frogging, which is hiding in houses unbeknownst to the owners in the Harper house. Mindy is experienced as she tries to keep a low profile so that she never gets caught, while Alec decides he wants to make the family believe they are going insane. However, Mandy is accidentally seen by the repairman while exploring the house. She is the girl he believed was Jackie's daughter. So what a twist. Like, holy crap. Like, I did see something like this happening, but I thought it was such a more insidious thing that was going to be happening here. I thought it might be a home intruder story when things were starting to go missing, when the repairman said that there was a girl in the house and everything. I was like, okay, we've got a home invasion story. It isn't supernatural anymore. We're good. But these people really aren't bad people. They're just trying to like do something fun, maybe on a dare or because they have to, because they're homeless, but just doing something seemingly harmless for the most part. I mean, highly illegal, highly questionable, but not absolutely terrible, not with ulterior motives of I'm going to go in this house, be a home intruder, and then just kill everybody in the house.
Yeah, that's what I thought about the interesting play on this genre that they, you know, they're talking about the horror, but like these, like you're saying, these people are they're homeless and they're trying to find somewhere to stay. And like for a while, it's like docile. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I thought it was going something very dangerous, but now, you know, they're just staying in their house. Yeah, that's creepy. But also they're not trying to do anything. They didn't come in with any malintent as far as you know. But I also got obsessed with this whole concept of frogging. And if you're curious and you want to be freaked out, you can Google it. There are lots of videos of real people frogging. And it's super weird of like people catching other people who are staying in their attic or staying in weird closet they have under the stairs or something. So I really became like obsessed with this concept of frogging. I remember even the first time I watched it, like I was like, oh my God, that thing I hear in the floor creaks. What if somebody's up there? Like, what if they're staying in my house and I would never have any idea?
Off of that, like when we were talking about how, you know, the scariness really hits home. You know, there's always been stories of like people find, you know, their food's missing, blah, blah, blah. They start like kind of going crazy. And then they, you know, set up security cameras and find people in their house. That's always been terrifying to me. Usually it's malintent, you know, the fact that they make this movie more like, you know, that they're just joking around. They're not, you know, like you said, they're not there with any malintent. They're going in there just to do it. And I think that they really, when they start the scene with the handheld camera, and that to me was, okay, the movie is changing. Like we are going into phase 2. Because at first you're all set because all the shots have been, you know, either drone shots, close-ups, like stable shots. And then when they hit you with that handheld shot, you're like, what the heck? Yeah. And it really is. I mean, that's the moment where you're like, oh my God, everything, they start playing out, you know, why things have happened. And you really still don't know. but I love that there's two perspectives in one movie. You know, they have the perspective from the family, then you get that other perspective of the same craziness that's going on, but through these people's eyes. And I thought that's incredible. You got two different perspectives playing side by side. I've never really seen that pulled off that well.
Oh yeah. So going back to what I was saying before with the whole isolation and how there's not a lot of people around, this kind of two things to say about that with this opening scene with the handheld camera, where you see two people who are outside the house and are on the street. And I thought it was really interesting that it was this handheld camera that kind of makes it feel like it could happen to anyone. That's what it made me think of, it's just a street of houses. I live on a street with houses. That could happen to anyone who's closing their garage, and it doesn't close all the way. But it also is interesting to note that there's no one else around on this street. There's nobody walking their dog. I think there's somebody walking their dog in one shot, but there's in this specific handheld shot, there's nobody else there, and nobody sees this happening. And it kind of just plays into the whole creepy and unsettlingness of or unsettled vibe that you get, because it could happen to anyone. Not everybody's watching you in your house at all times.
I think the one little detail in this sequence that really caught me off guard and really I think it's so little, and they talk about it, yes, but it's a little thing that actually really does play a big role here, is when they go up to that guest room and they plop on the bed and there's that puff of dust saying nobody has been up there. They don't have friends. They don't have guests. That just leads you even more why don't these people have people over? Why are they just they are trying to isolate themselves? There must be something going on here. Number one, their marriage is bad. The son is getting into bad situations. We think the son is a murderer at this point. There's a reason that nobody they have picked out this house and know that this house is going to be probably the safest house for them to go, because nobody comes in, nobody goes out except this little family. And if they're at school and at work, they're not at home. So this really is a good place for them to be, we think.
I wonder, even watching it now, even reading some of the reviews, and I'm not going to spoil it yet, but I do wonder how intentional it was for them to pick this house. Having, we don't really get that background story. We don't get, we see her, obviously she's been doing this for a while, Mindy, with the frogging thing. But we don't really know how this happened or if it was intentional for Alec. We don't know how intentional it was for Alec to be at this house. Is it just a coincidence, or was it planned by him? Maybe he suggested it. He tagged along for the first time. So that's kind of a red flag for me, especially knowing, how it plays out.
I mean, she did say you picked a good one. So, I mean, he did pick it out. Okay. And so I think she thinks that he's been just staking this place out for a while now.
Knowing how it ends, you're like, oh, and you're like, whoa, I wish I could see more into this. And that he only comes along, like Juliana was saying, but he's as the cameraman, do we even know if does he need a house? Does he, it kind of makes it sound like he doesn't really need this, but he's just coming along to document it. And so he kind of plays along for a bit, and you're like, hey, this is kind of odd. And he kind of, not to judge, but he kind of looks weird to me. The angles that they put his face on, they show him and the lighting, I'm like, whoa, you're looking a little creepy. I wouldn't want anybody in my house, but that looks a little creepy to me.
I didn't know who it was at first. And I was reading the review and they said, you might know him from It. And I was like, oh my God, yes, it's the bully from It. He's in a lot of scary movies. I've seen him in a few, but he had dark hair in that movie. And so, it was kind of hard to tell. But I think he's in Black Mirror as well. I don't know his name, forgive me. But when I noticed that, I got so excited. I'm like, this is that guy. He does it well. He's that scary, kind of mysterious teen that obviously just wants to rage and is always up to no good. But that was a big thing for me. I mean, you really see him fall too throughout this, beginning. Like you said, he starts out normal. He starts out, he's just there for the fun. And then you kind of see him darken up a little bit. And like you said, they definitely played on that with the lighting, the music, his his tendencies get a little more weird as the time goes on. And I do love him as an actor, though. I will say I was very excited to know that was him.
And we do see that happening. I mean, he becomes more and more daring as time goes on. I mean, he's out while the parents are out, but then they come back and he still is trying to be out, trying to really push it. And it gets to a point where, I mean, he's out while they're asleep. He's pulling down the covers, watching over them as they sleep, peeing on the dad, making the dad think that he peed himself. That was crazy. That was insane. But then we get to a point where, and I forget how Mindy got down to the basement, but Mindy's down in the basement and she witnesses Greg killing Todd. And she goes to alert Alec only to see him putting Connor in the bathtub. The couple argue and Alec accidentally pushes her down the stairs, rendering her unconscious. Alec then hides her in Greg's car. After Jackie leaves to take Connor to the hospital, Greg leaves in his car, unknowingly taking Maddie with him. Holy crap. I mean, I knew, and this is just my years of being obsessed with movies and knowing how people write movies and knowing too much, but I knew something was wrong with Greg, and I had a feeling from the beginning that Greg was not who we thought he was. And so it did not surprise me to see that he was the one that was doing the bat. But I mean, I was weighing my options of if it might have been some of the home invaders or if it was Greg himself, because clearly he has something against Todd and everything because of his wife's infidelity and everything. But I mean, this is when we finally see things, answers get answered.
I was going to say, what a twist, and at this point, Connor, he kind of disappears. Like after they take him, and the wife kind of disappears at this point too. So they kind of weigh out those options. Like, you don't really see what happens at the hospital. And I feel like maybe like they weren't focusing on that because it really didn't play into the story. But yeah, when it's just Greg home, and it gets confusing because the two, they go back and they play the same scene, but they'll play what happened before. We didn't know Mindy was in the garage at that time and saw that. We didn't see that part. All we saw was the bat. So we're thinking Connor at that time. But the whole thing, like you said, Todd popping up out of nowhere. They didn't show him coming up. They obviously didn't feel like that was important to the story. And it also adds like mysterious, where did this guy come from? Why is she taking him in the garage? Like you're already pushing your marriage, and then Greg. Now for me, at least, Nick, I know you said it wasn't, but that was the first time that I was like, oh, I didn't know he was doing that. I didn't know, he's the detective. And for me, that was like, oh, crap. But it made sense, like you said, with the wife's cheating and, it made sense.
Also with the other kid that was earlier, Braun, being all creeped out and just losing it when he looked at the two detectives. Like it was either Spitsky or it was Greg.
See, that for me, like I was so confused by that scene, because I until later didn't realize, what was going on. I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with that guy? Like, why does he look like that? And it was also a little bit confusing because they showed a picture of someone else that I guess it was the man that they accused of doing these murders, these, kidnapping. And I thought that that's who they were going to see. Now that could just be my brain lagging. But when I saw the guy was younger, I was like, oh, and then he looked like that. And I was like, dear Lord, like, what is going on? Like, so I really hadn't made the connection yet. I was very much caught into the way they were portraying it, that Greg wasn't responsible until that moment. And, that's when I feel like Mindy in her head was kind of like, oh my God, these people are crazy. Like, I need to get out of here, and when she gets put in the back of the car, and Alex sees her get drove away, and he's like, oh crap. Like, first of all, why did you put her body back there? Like, I wouldn't have done that, but maybe, I don't know. That to me was wild.
Yeah, Greg, to me, the first thing, red flag for me was like, why is he not going with them to the hospital? Like, I was like, even if there's some, killer in your house, why I don't really get the fact that you would rather go in, hurt this person, find this person versus going to the hospital with your son who needs you. Like, I was like, why is he not going? I was like,
that's
okay,
some toxic masculinity right there.
Yeah, I was like,
all just macho man of I'm a defend my house here. I ain't gonna let nothing happen to my son. I gotta take it out, like vigilanteism.
But at the same time, though, I feel like that's how they portrayed it. But little do you know that there's other stuff going on, and I think him staying at the house, and we see the shots of him they go back to the shot of him going around the house with the gun. We see the background, like they're so good at that with the, seeing the figure in the background. At first we're like, oh my God, what is that? Especially when the kid gets attacked, he's at the computer and he gets those messages like, do you know what frogging is, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of like, wait, okay, so it's not paranormal. This is somebody like messing with these people. And then when we find out later that it's Alec, it really adds like, okay, wow, we're going back into the movie, but we're also learning all the stuff we had questions about. So I really like how they did that.
I just really love playing with perspective. I just think that's so interesting, and that they showed almost the end of the movie, quote unquote, or the end of the scene, the end of their time in that house, and cut it and then showed you really what happened. I just think that's so interesting to see what you only saw a bits and pieces. So it's like, it kind of ties into my whole true crime thing, like a witness unreliability, where you just see what you want to see and you don't really know what's actually going on, and no one really does unless it's an unbiased, wide frame of really what's everyone's thinking, what's going on. So I don't know. I just really love when movies go back in time and show you what actually happened, especially when it makes sense. Like sometimes they go back in time and you're like, oh, that's not how the scene played out in the first time. You just tricked me. But this really shows you where those actual frames, like shots you saw the first time, play into the next ones.
Exactly. So then we see Mindy awaken in the trunk of the car of Greg's car. She searches Greg's bag and finds multiple green pocket knives and Justin's shirt, revealing that Greg all along has been the kidnapper. When he parks up in the forest, Mindy sneaks out and tries to call 911 to no avail. She's out of service. She comes across an old trailer where Justin and Michael are trapped in makeshift closets. She tries to free them, and Greg ambushes her and takes her back into his house. And as he's in there giving his villain speech, he eventually shoots her dead. Alec, hearing that, comes after Greg, attacks him with the axe, disarming him. Greg knocks Alex out and stabs himself to make it seem like he has been the one that's attacked. A lot happened here. It's crazy, as I've been saying. I mean, I think when Mindy finally finds out all of the, she realizes what has happened. I find it interesting that Mindy seems to be more of our perspective as an audience, kind of the one that's a little bit more innocent to this, just being placed in the situation that, she's been hearing stories and seeing news about having grown up in this town, having heard about all these kids. I don't think she quite understands what's going on in the back of the trunk. I don't think she quite realizes it until she gets to the trailer, what really is going on here. But she's heard of the green knives, and so she knows something is bad. And I thought it was interesting that the knives were in evidence bags, as if trying to throw off the fact that, hey, he's carrying evidence around. He's a detective. He just hasn't gotten it to the thing yet. But we as the audience know what is going on. We know Mindy is in big trouble at this point. And then Greg in the trailer comes, just like Alex, same kind of shot choice of Greg coming in from the background. The audience, we know what's going on, but Mindy doesn't. I thought that was just such a cool juxtaposition, using those techniques that we've been alluded to before, and just bringing those back and repeating them over and over.
I was going to say, there's a lot to unpack in that the short period of time where all this really goes down. The thing about the green knives, though, how did Alec get the green knife to stab in the soap when he bound and gagged the son? Because remember, there was the green knife in the soap, and I don't remember if he picked it or if he had them too.
Well, I think it's because he's had it all along, because when we see the cutscene at the end, Greg holds out the knife to Alec to give him, I think Alex had this knife with him his entire life.
And it might have been another thing, to mess with Greg, because when Greg found him and saw that, he was like, oh, you know what I mean? And I think we don't know that at the time, because we think, we don't know what's going on. But that was a big thing for me. And it gets wild. And as soon as she finds them in there and tries to help them, he takes her. I feel like you said, we're more on her side when it comes to the perspective, because she went in trying to have fun. She wanted to leave after 5 days. Alec wouldn't let her. Now she's in this this bad situation, and she knows what's going on. And, what follows, when he kills her. Another thing about that, though, when he shot in the wall and put the gun in her hand, that's kind of when the audience is like, okay, this is a twisted cop. And that was another view that it was another basically like underlying storyline, like, cops kind of taking advantage of their role. He's a detective, but he's the one doing this, but he knows how to cover it up. And you really see that in that scene when he, and especially when he stabs himself too, like it's, we kind of see that side of him more.
Yeah, something that comes to mind that I was talking about earlier with the whole perspective thing, like when they were in the bathtub, he saw the green knife. My thought were, oh God, he thinks somebody's here to take his son, like the killer's here. But what's really going on is he's like, somebody's discovered, like someone knows what's going on. And so maybe like now, I was thinking about now that why he stays in the house, because he knows someone's there that knows he's not truthful and he's not who he says. He's
got to cover it up.
He has to kill them off too.
That's why, especially when Mindy finds out and Mindy is there, he has to take care of Mindy. He's not going to let her live. He's not just taking her back to the house to let her live. Like, I think in the back of his mind, he might even be thinking, and I may be going a little bit too far in this, but I think in the back of his mind is, how did she get the green knife? It must not just be her that's in the house. And I think that's why he brought her back to the house, because that's something that didn't make sense to me as I was watching it, was why would he just not take care of her when he's in the woods? Like, why does he have to take her back to the house? And I think it's because he has to make an example for the other person he knows is also still in the house.
Absolutely.
And he's also able to explain away, like, how he's explained away her death too, because he's saying, he's like, all I need you to do is stand up. And I was like, okay, that's a weird request. What's going on? And so that once we see what really happens, you're like, oh God, like I gasped so many times during this last few minutes of this movie. I was like, oh God, there's only like 10 minutes left. What's going to happen? And it all happened so fast where I was like, what? Oh my God. And so you just learn so much about that character in like so few minutes that's actually been going on the whole time.
Alec recovers consciousness and grabs Greg's gun. When Alec steps into the light without a mask, Greg recognizes him. Alec kills Greg before he can explain himself. Spitsky arrives and shoots Alec in the shoulder. Alec says Spitsky's name, and Spitsky also recognizes him. Jackie and Connor come home to find it swarming with police. Spitsky finds a bag of evidence in Greg's car, and the two boys are rescued from the trailer. Flashbacks show a younger Alec and Braun encountering Greg, implying that Alec was the other surviving child. Present-day Alec is carried into an ambulance, and we fade to black. What an ending. Like, it all kind of finally reveals itself at the end. I didn't pick up the Alec part, which was another twist that we didn't see coming, that Alec really was the other kid. And so this whole time, the reason he picked the house was to get back against Greg. And we finally realized this whole time he is a good house picker, because he's been on this mission ever since he was young to get back against Greg.
I was going to say all the loose ends definitely tie up super quick. I mean, you really get, but it's they didn't do it too fast. You're not like, wait, what? They kind of go back shot, every shot that you're like, wait, what? And like they go back and explain. And like, I was worried, they were going to take Alec, because I did not hear what he said when he was on the ground and he said the detective's name. I didn't hear what he said. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, it drove me crazy. And then when they show the scene of like, they show him finding the stuff in Greg's car, they go and then they show the trailer surrounded by police. I was like, okay,
Yeah. And I think I really liked the shots at the end, because like you were saying, it wasn't too slow. It was almost very like again, very artistic of like, I'm showing you what's happening, but we're also remembering, like kind of memorializing everything, and that it's kind of coming to a close, because those shots were like slow, but also creepy, because you're like, I've seen this before. What did they not show me again before? What was the perspective difference there? And when they finally show him, and the fact that he's this middle-aged man approaching two boys walking alone in the wilderness, showing that, having the knife and having the little frog in the back pocket. I don't know. There was something, I knew there was something in his back pocket, and I was like, what was it? What is it? And so I had to zoom in, and it was a little tiny frog, I think. And I was like, that's weird. I don't know what that means. But I also think it is weird because I've seen this movie before, years ago, but I think it would be two thoughts about that. It might be an interesting movie to watch again, but I also like knowing what's happening. But I wonder if it's one of those movies where you're going to notice those things because you weren't supposed to. It might not be as interesting to watch again because they didn't want you to know that. Yeah,
like Sixth Sense. You can't watch Sixth Sense again because it ruins the entire movie. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say the back pocket. It's a Pez thing, and I was like, oh my god, because Alec, while him and Mindy are in the house before we know anything, he is eating Pez out of this thing, and I'm like, that's weird. Why is he eating Pez? That's so random. But it's that same thing. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God. And now with the knife, it makes sense that he had the knife. So he kept that Pez thing and the knife, and they show that at the end. I mean, it's kind of like, wow, they took you for a journey with this movie. And it's a good story. It's a good, interesting, realistic enough where it's this kind of thing does happen in real life. And, seeing it unfold the way it did, I mean, the end together. But in those movies, like you said, you got to pay attention to those little details because at the end, and it might take a few times of watching it too, and then the next time you see it, you'll be like, oh crap, I never noticed that. But it's definitely a movie where every detail matters. But then again, not every detail matters. She was taking the pills and that went nowhere. So you don't know what to pay attention to. And, those little things like that, I mean, that is really what hits you. It's a little detail that you might have noticed in the beginning of the movie, didn't think much of it. And then at the end, they reveal, how it makes sense. And they did and they did all of that without saying anything. It was just with shots, just with music, just with, going back, using the same shot, but showing you beforehand what happened. They didn't have to really explain it. It was all done well with art. And I think that artistic expression they used was incredible.
Yeah, sometimes I kind of get a whole, detective discovered, the whole cop movie is kind of becoming old to me, in book form, podcast, everything like that. And I think, but I do still think that concept is interesting, but the whole kind of basic formula of how that typically goes is kind of becoming old to me and not as interesting. But this movie somehow had so many different things that intertwined that were all things that interest me. But it wasn't straight in your face this is a cop movie or a detective movie. And so it was kind of in the background. It was kind of the foundation of what was going on. But I thought it wasn't slapping you in the face that, oh, this is a detective trying to figure out a case and that's it. So I really liked that about this movie. And also they had the wrong guy, somebody's been convicted of this crime and they have the wrong person and known forever. And I guess you can also look at the relationship between him and Spensky, because Spensky is really bothered by everything that relates to this case. Whereas Greg seems kind of annoyed with him for that. But I think it would be interesting to go back and watch the first scenes with their relationship and the crime and visiting that guy, the kid who freaks out. I didn't even think about him freaking out with Greg, I just didn't even consider that. So
as we come to kind of wrap up our conversation here, I wanted to we're going to end with some personal thoughts and reviews. We don't really do a 5-point, a 5-star review system or anything, but just give us your final thoughts. And if you would suggest for people to watch this going forward, if they haven't done so already, if it's something you'd recommend to people. So why don't we start with you, Juliana? Kind of thoughts, reviews?
Well, I thought it was incredible. And for me, being a huge horror fan, it's hard for me to really find movies that are worthwhile. Now, everyone's making them and it's some of them are cheesy, funny. Some of them are just so gory, so there's rarely one. I think the last one I saw that intrigued me this much was Shutter Island. And it's been years. So this was a big, I love this. And I definitely have already recommended it since watching it last night to a few people, just because it keeps you, it's entertaining. And that's what movies are supposed to do. You know, there's different types of movies for different reasons. Sometimes you want to like laugh, some, you know, you want to be sad. But this is like pure entertainment from beginning to end. You're like, what's going on? You think you know, and then you don't. And the first time they trick you, you're just sucked in. And as a whole, I mean, 10 out of 10. Like, I loved it. I loved the different, it was unique. It was unique in the way they added the two perspectives side by side, not biased. You know, you see it raw, like how it's going down. You know, you have these questions that make you want to keep watching. And at the end, it all makes sense. You know, they don't leave you hanging. Like, they could do a sequel, but they don't have to, you know, but at the same time, you get those answers and you're like, wow, you know, you think you know somebody, and there's different underlying things. Like, you know, it was a whole ride, and I was in love. I'm a big fan of this work, and, you know, it being the director's, I think you said the second movie he ever did. I mean, wow. Like, I'd love to see the first, and I'd love to see more work from him. Like, I was blown out of the water.
Yeah, I loved it. At first I was thinking maybe I would only recommend it to people that were, you know, that like that genre, or, you know, might not be too frightened by a certain film. But then I'm thinking it's intertwined so many genres that I think you'd be okay whether or not you like horror or thriller or psychological thrillers. I think it intertwines so much of different concepts, and it also appeals to your human instinct of wanting to know what's going on or what you don't know. And so I think, like Juliana was saying, it's so entertaining, and that's what we want to see. You know, these days our attention span is so short, but I was like intrigued the whole time because I wanted to know what was actually going on. So I would definitely recommend this to anyone.
Awesome. Well, my final thoughts are going to be just a little tiny bit different. I mean, I'll say I went into this movie, like I've said, kind of being like, I'm not quite sure. I mean, I do this podcast specifically to be like introduced to movies that I would probably never see. And this is definitely one that I'd look at and see the horror tag, and absolutely automatically be like, I will never see this movie. I don't really want to. And so I went into it, and the first half of the movie, I was like, number one, there's not much horror going on. I think this is going to be okay. But at the same time being like, okay, I'm not a huge fan of this. It's really slow. There's a lot of writing things I don't really like. I mean, Helen Hunt, I thought they did a disservice to her as an amazing actor and everything. And so this is where I am halfway through the movie. But then we actually get to the switch up, and the rest of the movie, I was just having a fun time. I mean, there were elements in there where I was like, this is supposed to be scary, but it isn't. I'm like, why is there a horror thing at all? I mean, it's a horror movie, but it really isn't scary. This is a thriller. This is not a horror movie. Let's just take that tag off of this. They don't do jump scares. They don't really do, like, the only thing, it's just a little bit psychological and a little bit foreboding. So by the end of it, you know, I came out of it and I had a fun time, which was surprising to me, and something that I'm like, yes, this movie isn't perfect. In no way is it perfect. There isn't anything we haven't seen before. But what it does is it interweaves all these ideas in a way that we actually haven't seen before. The interweaving of these different genres and these different ways. I mean, first of all, if you think there's some supernatural, then comes psychological, then it becomes a murder mystery. It becomes this psychological thriller, and then home invasion. And it just interweaves it so well that it's just a fun time. And so if I'm giving my like final review and everything, I don't think that I would like put it up there in the amazing movie category that I would go back and see over and over and over again, but it's fun. And so I would absolutely recommend to people, if they want to just have a fun time watching a movie that's supposed to be scary but really isn't. Like Juliana, you saying last night, Juliana texted me at like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, like, I'm just getting to watch this and everything, and I'm not sure if this is going to be great for me to watch tonight, if I'm going to actually get any sleep at all. And I'm just like, you're going to be fine, girl. You're going to be okay. It's all right. This movie isn't that scary. You're going to be able to sleep. So if you want a fun time, watch this movie. It's great. So to take us home here, thank you so much, Juliana and Haley, for being a part of this podcast. Haley, thanks so much for recommending this movie. It's something, again, I would not have watched before, but I'm glad I did. And that's the whole point of this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Like, I love these conversations. Of course, for me, you know, I know you're not a super big horror person, but I am. So this was a perfect movie for me. And like, you know, it did remind me of a lot of the stuff we worked on together with Paranoid Insomniac. And it was, like you said, it was a fun ride. And it was, you know, drama mixed with thriller, mixed with, you know, the psychological aspect too, which are all the things I love. Not too much gore, you know, they didn't need that. And I liked it a lot. I enjoyed watching it, and I enjoyed having this conversation with you guys because, like, these, you know, it's fun to watch and reflect and hear different perspectives on how somebody took things. And, you know, for you, it wasn't like a top 10 recommend, but for me, like, I'm gonna be telling everyone about it. So
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me too. I was really excited to talk about this movie and kind of get to analyze what I experienced versus other people. And I think it's really cool that it could appeal to somebody who might not, like, I'm in love with this genre, where it might also appeal to someone who doesn't
I mean, after this, I'm going to be definitely like looking into like the horror genre in all a little bit more. I mean, I watched Get Out, and I put Get Out in like one of my top movies of all time. And it's technically a horror movie, but also kind of in this same kind of thing where it kind of isn't. And that's why too, like, Jordan Peele's stuff really appeals to me, because it's the same thing where he plays with horror concepts. And like, I haven't seen Nope, but I want to see it so bad. So it's like this, it's dipping that toe a little bit more and being something else rather than the just stereotypical supernatural gore, jump scare, monster, psychological. Like, I like thrillers. I've always liked thrillers. Like, Gone Girl also is one of my like top movies of all time too. And this movie plays on a lot of that. So this was fun. Thanks, Haley, so much. So that will about do it for this week's episode of the Cinema Club. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun talking to Haley and Juliana about it. But before you go, I just want to again say, as always, join the Cinema Club Facebook group at facebook.com/group/the Cinema Club TCC, and listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, and really anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, message me on Facebook if you'd like to get on the podcast. And finally, please leave us a review on iTunes. It will really help us reach more listeners and invite even more people to be members of the club. So thanks again, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.